When you picture an iconic landmark, okay, chances are the Statue of Liberty just springs right in your mind, doesn't it? Torch held high. She's known everywhere, this global symbol. But what if that silhouette, so well, hides this absolutely incredible, often really surprising backstory? Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a stack of sources, articles, research papers, historical docs, and we really unpack them to pull out the key insights, the important stuff for you. Today, we're going way beyond just the image. We're digging into how Lady Liberty actually came to be, her whole journey, and get ready for some twists. We're talking complex engineering, maybe some unexpected fundraising stories, and even the history of the island itself before the statue was even a thought. It feels like she's always been there, right? So solid, so permanent. But the origin story, wow, is incredibly rich. And the reasons behind it go way beyond just, a friendly gift, what was really driving this huge idea.
It's fascinating, yeah. Because it wasn't just about friendship, like you said. It was deeply, deeply tied into the whole political situation in France at the time. The big idea, it seems, sparked around 1865, came from Edouard de la Boulaye. He was a major French political thinker, very involved in the anti-slavery movement. He proposed this statue representing liberty for the U.S. Now, the idea was partly to honor America's centennial, the friendship, sure, but also specifically the end of slavery after the Civil War. But here's the insight, right? La Boulaye really hoped it would sort of nudge the French people, too, inspire them towards democracy, because they were living under a pretty repressive monarchy back then.
Ah, okay, so it was kind of a double message. A gift to America, yes, but also a symbol for France's own hopes.
Yeah.
Interesting. How did a sculptor get looped into turning this big political idea into metal and stone?
Right. That's where Auguste Bartholdi comes in. He was a sculptor, already kind of known for thinking big, these huge, colossal projects. And he just completely jumped on board with La Boulaye's vision, became the designer. He pictured liberty enlightening the world, not as something violent, like revolution, but more like a peaceful beacon, lighting the path to freedom, to justice. And here's something really surprising from the sources, something that gives you a real insight into how art can adapt. That design, it wasn't originally for New York.
Really?
Yeah. Bartholdi had first pitched a very similar concept for the Suez Canal entrance called Egypt Carrying the Light to Asia, but that fell through mostly because of money. And then, amazingly, he sort of repurposed and refined that whole idea for the United States.
No way. That's incredible to think that this icon had a previous draft for somewhere else entirely. Yeah. Okay, so they have the design. How did they pick the spot? Where would this giant actually stand?
Bartholdi himself, he came over to the U.S. in 1871, and apparently Bedloe's Island in New York Harbor just immediately grabbed him. He saw it as the perfect gateway to America, visible to every single ship sailing in, a really strategic, symbolic choice.
That makes sense. A powerful first sight. But, okay, the vision is one thing. Actually building it on that scale back in the 19th century, the engineering must have been, mind-blowing how they start. Especially beginning in Paris.
Yeah, and if you connect this to the bigger picture, the statue was just this huge leap in engineering. It was really a major precursor to things we take for granted now, like prefabrication and construction. So the actual work started in France, 1876. French artisans, craftsmen, all working under Bartholdi's very close watch. And they didn't build it all at once. They did it in sections, partly to show people, get them excited, like the arm with the torch. That was finished pretty early, 1876, and they displayed it in Philadelphia for the centennial.
Oh, I think I've seen pictures of that, just the arm.
Exactly. And then later, the head and shoulders, they were shown off at the Paris Universal Exposition in 1878. The whole statue wasn't fully assembled in Paris until between 1881 and 1884.
Wow. Piece by piece in Paris.
Yeah.
Long before it even got here. And the inside, the skeleton holding it all up, that involved some pretty legendary engineering too, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. So the first engineer, Eugène Viollet-le-Duc, he sadly died in 1879. And that's when they brought in Alexandre Gustave Eiffel.
The Eiffel.
Of the Eiffel Tower.
The very same. And he came up with this totally ingenious internal iron framework. Think of it like a giant pylon about 98 feet tall with a double helix staircase inside. It had 4 main legs connected by 9 levels of horizontal supports and diagonal braces, all made from around 250,000 pounds of puddled iron. And, this whole structure, it was basically a dry run for his Eiffel Tower later, a huge experiment.
Amazing. So the statue skeleton was practiced for the tower. In a way, yeah. And then over that skeleton, you have the skin, 80 tons of copper sheets. Originally, maybe a 1/4 inch thick. They cut these into 300 pieces, and then they were hand-hammered using this technique called repoussé. hammered from the inside to shape them and getting them down to about 330 of an inch thick. Really thin.
Okay, wait, you've got this thin copper skin and this massive iron skeleton, two different metals. How did they attach them without causing, like, major problems, corrosion, or things expanding and contracting differently? How did 19th century engineers figure that out?
Right. That's where the real genius comes in, tackling that critical challenge. Galvanic corrosion. They knew about it. So the copper skin was attached to the iron frame using about 1,500 U-shaped copper saddles. And these were held on with, get this, 300,000 copper rivets. But Eiffel knew that copper touching iron directly would cause corrosion. So the American engineers, they came up with the fix. They put a barrier between them. It was an asbestos cloth soaked in shellac, placed right between the iron armature and the copper skin. And those U-shaped saddles, they were clever too. They were designed to allow a little bit of movement so the copper and iron could expand and contract at their own rates with temperature changes without tearing things apart. The statue could sort of breathe.
That's incredibly clever engineering.
It really was. And the whole scale, you have to remember the time. When it was unveiled, Lady Liberty was the tallest iron structure ever built. The pedestal involved the biggest concrete pour ever done up to that point. It even had one of the first passenger elevators and indoor lighting.
It's just staggering.
Yeah. She's 151 feet, 5 inches tall, not counting the base, which is another 154 feet, weighs 450,000 pounds. Just her index finger is 8 feet long. And her bust, 36 feet. It's immense.
Okay, the engineering is just astounding. But building it is one thing. Paying for it.
Yeah.
That must have been an equally massive challenge, right? How did they scrape together the money for this huge international project?
That's a really important question, isn't it? How do you fund something like this? Le Boulez's idea was always that it should be a joint effort. The French would pay for the statue itself, and the people in America would fund the pedestal it stood on.
A shared responsibility.
Exactly. And what's really great and tells you a lot about how people felt about it is that it became this huge grassroots success. In France, they set up the Franco-American Union in 1875, raised about 400,000 francs. In the U.S., the American Committee for the Statue of Liberty formed in 77. Their job was the pedestal, about $125,000. But the key thing, some wealthy people chipped in, but it was really the small donations from, like they said, hundreds of thousands of working people and children on both sides of the ocean. That's what made it happen.
That's really powerful. It wasn't just a gift from government to government, but people to people.
Yeah.
Now, the island itself, Bedloe's Island.
Yeah.
It had its own long history before the statue even arrived, right?
Oh, absolutely. Long before Lady Liberty, it was originally one of the Oyster Islands, had Native American history. Then it was used as an isolation station, for ships arriving with sick passengers. A quarantine spot, it was a hospital, even an asylum for Tory sympathizers during the Revolution. And then from 1808, it was a military post. Fort Wood. It's an 11-pointed star fort, and that old fort, it actually became the base, integrated right into the pedestal design.
So the statue is literally standing on layers and layers of history.
Wow.
I remember hearing, though, that the American side almost dropped the ball on the funding for that pedestal. There was a crisis.
Yes, there was. Construction on the pedestal started in 84. The architect was Richard Morris Hunt, a big name. He designed these really thick poured concrete walls, which, again, was the biggest concrete pour ever done at that time.
But the money ran out.
Exactly. Funds dried up in the U.S. Work just stopped. It was becoming a bit of an embarrassment. The statue was ready in France, waiting. And that's when Joseph Pulitzer stepped in, the newspaper publisher, New York World.
Ah, Pulitzer.
Yeah. He launched this massive, really high-profile fundraising campaign in his paper in 1885. Went on for 6 months. He basically shamed people and rallied them at the same time. And it worked. He raised over $100,000, mostly in small donations again, from everyday readers, and that was enough to get the pedestal finished. He really saved the day.
Incredible story. Okay, so pedestal funded, statue built in France. Now you have to get this giant metal person across the Atlantic and put her back together. I can barely imagine the logistics.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And again, thinking about modern methods, the whole transport and reassembly, it was basically an early, massive example of off-site construction. So they had the official presentation ceremony in Paris, July 4th, 1884, gave it to the U.S. minister. Then they took it apart into about 350 pieces, packed them into over 200 wooden crates, and shipped it across the Atlantic on a French Navy ship, the Isère. It arrived in New York Harbor, June 17th, 1885. Huge celebration, boats everywhere cheering.
This has been quite a sight.
Oh, yeah. But then the pedestal wasn't quite ready yet, so all those crates had to sit in storage for almost a year while the pedestal was finally completed.
Wow. This massive, complex jigsaw puzzle just waiting for its platform. So once the pedestal was ready, how do they actually put it all back together in the 1880s?
Right. Well, that shipping in pieces, it really showed incredible foresight. You know, the benefits we talk about today with prefabrication. Reduced time on site, less waste, better quality control maybe, design flexibility. They were already seeing that back then. Once the pedestal was done in 1886, the reassembly went surprisingly fast. The construction crew, apparently incredibly fearless, many were recent immigrants themselves, interestingly. And they didn't use scaffolding like we think of it today. Everything was hoisted up using steam-powered cranes and derricks. Eiffel's iron framework went up first, the central spine. Then they attached the copper skin piece by piece.
Must have been dangerous work. High up, no modern safety gear.
No doubt. And then came the big day, the unveiling. It must have been something else for New York, for the whole country. It really was. October 28th, 1886. That was the official unveiling of liberty enlightening the world. The weather wasn't great, actually. Wet, foggy. But estimates say maybe 1 million New Yorkers still turned out. Packed the harbor on boats, watched from shore, rooftops. And during the ceremony, there was this great moment. Bartholdi, the sculptor, he was up in the torch. He was supposed to pull a rope to drop the French flag covering her face at a specific cue.
Okay.
Well, apparently he misheard the cue or got excited, and he dropped the flag early.
Oh, no.
But it just led to this immediate massive roar from the crowd, cannons firing, boat whistles blowing, cheering. It was electric. President Grover Cleveland was there, formally accepted the statue. He called Bartholdi the greatest man in America today. And the celebration spilled into the streets. It actually sparked the very first ticker-tape parade ever held in New York City, all in her honor.
What a beginning. So she's standing tall, a beacon. But her story doesn't just stop in 1886, does it? She keeps evolving, keeps meeting new things as history unfolds around her.
Absolutely. If you think about it, her life since then really mirrors the country's own journey. Its changes, its challenges, like her color, for instance. She started out copper-colored, obviously, shiny brown. But over time, this natural process called patination happened. Exposure to the air, the salt spray, it created that greenish-blue coating we see today. And that patina, it's not dirt, it's actually a protective layer. It helps the copper survive for centuries.
Yeah.
Trying to clean it back to brown would actually damage her, and it wouldn't last anyway.
Right, I've heard people suggest cleaning her, but it's actually good for her. And then almost immediately she becomes this powerful symbol for immigrants, doesn't she?
Profoundly so, yes. Ellis Island opens just nearby in 1892, and for the next few decades, over 12 million immigrants sail past her into New York Harbor. For so many, she was literally the first thing they saw of America, this giant, welcoming figure. And then Emma Lazarus's poem, The New Colossus, gets added to the pedestal in 1903. You know the lines. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free.
Iconic lines.
They really cemented her image as a symbol of America being a place of opportunity or refuge. Then, she becomes a national monument in 1924. The National Park Service takes over in 1933. Bedloe's Island gets officially renamed Liberty Island in 1956. The Museum of Immigration opens inside the pedestal in 1972. It all builds on that identity.
But she hasn't just been a passive symbol, has she? She's also been a site for people within America to make their voices heard, even through protests. That seems kind of fitting for a symbol of liberty.
It really does. Over the decades, she's been the backdrop for all sorts of political expression. Suffragettes fighting for the vote rallied there, anti-war protesters, Puerto Rican nationalists made demonstrations there. There was even a bomb, a time-delayed bomb that went off in the base in 1980. Caused some damage. And in 1982, protesters chained themselves to the structure inside the Crown.
Wow.
Yeah. And, this raises an interesting point, doesn't it? What does it mean when a symbol of freedom becomes a place people choose to express their dissent, their disagreements?
It suggests the symbol is alive, maybe, not just a relic.
Exactly. It shows it's still relevant, still powerful enough for people to use it to make their point. It's not just static history. It's part of an ongoing conversation about what liberty means.
And maintaining such an old, complex structure must be a constant challenge, too. She's weathered a lot.
A huge ongoing effort. Like, the torch visitors haven't been allowed up there since 1916. There was an explosion nearby during World War I, the Black Tom explosion, that sent shrapnel and caused damage. The biggest restoration was probably in the 1980s, leading up to her centennial in 86. They had to replace almost all the original iron armature bars. the ones holding the skin, because they were rusting badly, replaced them with stainless steel, and they completely rebuilt the torch, following Bartholdi's original design more closely, and gilded the flame with gold leaf.
A major overhaul.
Huge. And then more recently, she faced closures after 9/11, and Hurricane Sandy in 2012 did significant damage to Liberty Island itself, the infrastructure. It just highlights the constant need for care, for investment, to keep this incredible landmark safe for the future.
So when we look at the Statue of Liberty, she's not just this static monument. She's really a dynamic story, isn't she? A testament to ingenuity, to sheer perseverance, and yeah, to the ideals she represents, ideals that keep evolving. Makes you wonder, what other hidden depths, what other surprising stories might be waiting inside the familiar icons we see every day if we just took the time to unpack them?